When a community can't trust the courtroom, justice becomes just another market. This network survived because blind spots were treated as normal.
4:47 a.m. Minnesota winter holds a neighborhood hostage. The kind of cold that turns breath into evidence. Streetlights buzz over a cul-de-sac of high-value homes. Quiet, sealed, sleeping. No traffic. No dogs. No movement. Then, black SUVs roll in without sirens. No decals. No spotlight. Just matte paint and disciplined spacing. Doors open in sequence. Boots hit snow like punctuation marks. A stack forms at the front entry. Long guns angled down, muzzles controlled, eyes scanning windows and rooflines. 4:49 a.m. A steel ram strikes the door. Wood doesn't just splinter. Status splinters. A flashbang detonates inside. White light, concussive pressure, a heartbeat of chaos. Then the sound that follows is worse than the blast. Federal calm. Federal warrant. Search warrant. This is not a county operation. This is multi-agency. According to federal sources, the raid was executed under sealed federal warrants, language built for long-term investigations, not sudden suspicion. 4:52 a.m. A perimeter locks down. Homeland Security investigation-style tactical presence, plate carriers, face coverings, professional silence, holds the street while entry teams clear the interior. The look is unmistakable. Federal posture, federal tempo. And then the headline detonates across the country. A Minnesota judge's property. A Sinaloa-linked investigation. And reportedly, assets near $100 million. If that number is real, why would it be sitting in Minnesota, inside a judge's orbit? If the target is a judge, how many cases did this touch before the door got hit? Because a judge doesn't just represent the law. A judge decides outcomes: bail, suppression, credibility, sentencing, who walks, who stays, who disappears into paperwork. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress. And when federal agents breach a fortress at 4:49 a.m., it usually means the story started months or years earlier. The raid is not the beginning. The raid is the reveal. If you want the full truth, hit like and subscribe the channel so this story reaches more people. 5:06 a.m. A second team enters through a side door. Evidence technicians follow immediately. Gloves on, body cams rolling, photo logs running. The operation shifts from kinetic to clinical. This is the part the public never sees. Chain of custody as a weapon. Every item photographed where it sits. Every movement documented. Because in court, the defense doesn't attack the truth first. It attacks the handling. 5:19 a.m. An interior room. Locked. Reinforced. The kind of door you don't install for privacy. You install it for time. Agents don't rush. They document. They mark. Then they breach. Inside, containers. Bundles. Stacked packages. Organized. Staged. Counted. The initial reporting frames it as approximately $100 million in assets reportedly discovered. Careful language, careful liability. But here's the first major revelation, the one that tells you this is bigger than a corrupt individual. Cartel money doesn't sit like savings. It cycles like inventory. If it's staged, it's meant to move. If it's meant to move, there's a route. If there's a route, there are handlers. And if a judge sits anywhere near that route, this isn't just corruption. It's institutional compromise. 6:02 a.m. Phones go into Faraday bags. Laptops are photographed before a single key is touched. Storage drives are sealed in evidence bins. The second battlefield opens. Digital. Because the money is loud. But the data is louder. Encrypted messaging. Burner phone clusters. Spreadsheet ledgers disguised as expenses. Routing instructions written like grocery lists. According to federal sources, this is where cases explode, when the device tells you the network. Not a suspect, a system. But what agents found next changed everything. 6:28 a.m. A financial trail begins to emerge, not in cash, but in structure. Shell companies, property holding LLCs, consulting invoices that don't consult, security services that never show up, Payments that move in clean-looking increments designed to avoid attention. This isn't a suitcase crime. This is laundering architecture. And architecture needs professionals. Now the story tightens like a vice, because we've seen what cartel-linked pipelines look like in the region. In a Minnesota-linked DEA case describing cartel-source distribution into the Twin Cities area, court documents and reporting describe methamphetamine, cocaine, and fentanyl moving through a network tied to Sinaloa and CJNG sourcing. That same case describes seizures: 1,600 pounds of methamphetamine, 2 kilograms of fentanyl, 30,000 counterfeit fentanyl pills, 45 firearms, and more than $2.5 million in drug proceeds. Now translate those numbers into human cost. DEA states 2 milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal depending on a person's tolerance and body size. DEA also states 1 kilogram of fentanyl has the potential to kill 500,000 people. 2 kilograms, by that federal benchmark, represents the potential for 1 million deaths. 1 million. That's not a statistic. That's an annihilation radius. Families across Minnesota and the upper Midwest have been mourning for years. Now they would understand what the pipeline was feeding. 7:11 a.m. Evidence bins leave the house. Not cardboard. Not trash bags. Sealed containers, barcode labeled, professional proof for a professional courtroom. And then comes the betrayal. The reporting indicates the property is tied to a sitting judge. A judge. The person who looks at a defendant and says, "Remand." The person who rules evidence admissible or suppressed. The person whose signature can change the trajectory of a life. If this is real, the damage isn't just money laundering. The damage is trust laundering, turning a courtroom into camouflage. Comment, verdict. If you believe she deserved justice. 8:02 a.m. The investigation starts mapping outward. Because money laundering never stands alone. It is the shadow of drug distribution. And drug distribution requires logistics, routes, stash locations, cut houses, couriers, firearms for enforcement, and corrupt access for protection. We know what multi-agency cartel cases look like when they reach indictment stage. A separate HSI St. Paul-led transnational case described alleged importation and distribution of methamphetamine, heroin, and fentanyl across multiple states, plus a money laundering conspiracy moving proceeds back to Mexico, investigated with partners including IRS criminal investigation. If the federal footprint includes money laundering specialists, the target isn't just drugs. It's financial immunity. 9:14 a.m. A network timeline is built like a crime scene diagram. Front end, supply. Middle, distribution cells. Back end, proceeds collection and laundering. Overlay, institutional shielding. The story stops being a judge with dirty money and becomes a system that kept dirty money safe. And then comes the twist that keeps viewers locked in. But what agents found next changed everything. 10:03 a.m. Because the digital evidence doesn't just show transactions. It shows conversations, who asked for what, who promised what, who needed what handled. And when the word handled appears in cartel-adjacent communication, it rarely means paperwork. This is where authority figure exposure becomes unavoidable. Judges don't move money. They move outcomes. A suppressed search warrant here. A reduced bond there. A delayed hearing. A case reassigned. A probation violation treated gently. Small decisions, repeated, become a corridor. A corridor becomes a route. Route becomes a pipeline. Share this video so communities understand what was hiding. 10:47 a.m. Now we anchor the human cost again, because numbers without faces become noise. Minnesota Department of Health reported 1,274 overdose deaths in 2023, preliminary, noting most fatal overdoses, about 70%, involved synthetic opioids like fentanyl. That is not a trend line. That is 1,274 endings. And when cartel-sourced fentanyl floods an area, it doesn't just kill users. It kills families. It kills communities' sense of safety. It fills foster systems. It overloads ERs. It teaches children what Narcan is before they learn algebra. 11:33 a.m. The story now shifts from shock to righteous anger. Because if a judge was compromised, even indirectly, the question becomes, how many cases did the system process while the system itself was infected? How many people went to prison while traffickers bought protection? How many people died because supply chains stayed open? 12:18 p.m. This is where the investigation becomes a referendum on institutional integrity. Procedural failures aren't always dramatic. They're quiet. They're meetings that didn't happen. Audits that never came. Colleagues who noticed something and convinced themselves it was none of my business. Silence became a weapon, and it was effective. Because institutions don't collapse when criminals attack them. They collapse when insiders stop defending them. 13:06 p.m. Immediate consequences begin to take shape, if not publicly named yet, then structurally inevitable. Asset forfeiture procedures, internal judicial oversight, recusal waves, sealed indictments moving through grand jury corridors. The initial report describes a developing story, with careful legal context and no confirmed arrests publicly stated at publication time. But raids like this don't happen for curiosity. They happen because prosecutors believe they can prove intent. And intent is the line between scandal and prison. If this shocked you, subscribe the channel and comment Fortress below. 14:02 p.m. Now we reach the reckoning, the systemic failure. How did the system allow it? It starts with the myth of immunity, that judges are above suspicion because they are symbols. Symbols become shields. Shields become blind spots. It continues with procedural gaps. Financial disclosures treated like routine forms instead of investigative tools. Conflict checks treated like administrative chores instead of alarms. It grows through complicity, not always active corruption, sometimes passive avoidance. The cowardice of, I don't want trouble. The comfort of, it's probably fine. And it finishes with normalized silence, the deadliest weapon in any corrupt machine. Because cartel operations don't just buy product movement. They buy time. They buy doubt. They buy the right people looking away. 15:10 p.m. Philosophically, this is the ugliest version of power. When authority becomes a laundering service. A cartel is violent, but corruption is quiet. A cartel threatens bodies, but corruption threatens truth. When a community can't trust the courtroom, it starts to believe justice is just another market. Bid, sold, delivered. And that belief is how democracies rot from the inside. 15:52 p.m. Lasting impact and the unresolved threat. Even if every dollar is seized, networks adapt. Routes change. LLCs dissolve and respawn. Couriers get replaced. The system gets tested again. So the final question isn't whether this raid was dramatic enough. The final question is, will it change behavior? Because this network survived because institutional blind spots were treated as normal. If citizens stop watching power, if oversight becomes optional, this can happen again. Stay informed. Stay engaged. If you believe no one is above the law, hit like. Comment, what should happen to any public official who shields organized crime, directly or indirectly? Subscribe because we're following every update until the full network is exposed and every protected name is forced into the light.